Hello, welcome once again to another edition of Where is the Church Prison Edition. We recognize that the church is not a building, but it is a people. And we know that there are exceptional individuals who are exhibiting the hands and the feet of Jesus, and they are the church. We have another wonderful interview with Ambrose Dawson, who has over 16 years experience in both male and female prison estates and is currently working at the headquarters of the prison service. This is not one to miss. Stay with us. Hello, I just want to thank Ambrose for joining us. I really appreciate you taking the time to speak because I know you have a lot of wisdom, a lot of wealth to share in that respect. So I'm looking forward to this. So I just wanted to start off by just saying a little bit about who you are and how you got involved in the prison service system.
Sure. Thank you, Max, for the invite. I do my best to kind of acknowledge and accept these invitations. But my name is Ambrose Dawson. As Max has introduced me, I am just a humble servant. I'm a member of the SDA Church, and I've worked in the prison service for over 16 years. I know I don't look like it, but I have worked in the service for that long.
You don't look like it. You don't look like it. But underneath the wisdom is there.
Internally, we'll tell you a slightly different story. But no, you're right. I literally been a part of BS for 15 years. I've worked in an operational capacity and the non-operational capacity, both in the male and the female estate. So you know, I've experienced, I've observed, I've seen some interesting things. So some of which I'll share with you throughout this session.
Yeah, no, and I think that's part of why we want to talk to you, because having spent so long within the system and also risen to working in the headquarters now, I can imagine your experiences have been quite shaping of who you are and how you work there, but also in terms of how that interacts with your faith. So I'm wondering if you could share then, what are some of the heartbreaking moments that you've experienced since you've been in the prison system?
Cool. So a great period of my time I spent in the female estate. Many of you may be familiar with HMP Holloway, literally around the corner from Holloway Church, literally. One of the most heartbreaking moments that will never leave me is when they have to separate a child from their mother. You know, for those of us in the public, we don't really see that side of it. To be honest, all you hear is that they incarcerate, they lock up for the individuals, but there is a side that is heartbreaking. You know, so some women come in obviously pregnant, and they have to serve their time. They give birth, and then they are separated from their child. Very often the child, depending on the history and the background of the mother, ends up going into care. Do you know what I mean? So again, you see where I'm going with this. And you know, fortunately, there are cases where family members are able to take ownership and responsibility for the child, whilst the parent serves their sentence, but it's not always the case. So that's for me one of the most heartbreaking things I've had to experience or witness time and time again. So yeah, that I would say that's probably at the top of the list, definitely.
Wow, yeah, that is certainly something that you don't think about. It's never in the news cycles. You don't see it in Hollywood blockbusters, anything like that. I can imagine though when you've witnessed that, and I can imagine it's more than once.
Mm.
How does that actually affect the mothers who now have to live life inside the prison while knowing that their children are perhaps in care or somewhere else outside of their care, really?
Sure, sure. Oh, so it's fortunate fortunate in England things are managed quite well. So there is a process, there is a protocol that they follow. You know what I mean? So leading up to the separation event, they prepare mother and baby for that experience. And what they do is they kind of um, introduce somewhat of a bit of a phased approach to this experience, so that the child will stay out for one night and then rejoin and then join mum again, and they will continue that cycle for a number of weeks before they completely separate for good. And I say for good, by God's grace, they are reunited. But yeah, so they do manage it quite well. But it's the long-term effect. Obviously, it can have a lasting effect on the mother, and the way she serves her sentence. And whilst I say this, this also affects males who have children, who they leave because of an offence or the fact that they've been sentenced to imprisonment. So it affects both my mother and father. I don't take away from the fathers, because we all know the impact of absent fathers in our community, in our society. But in the female estate, I've seen it directly, and it depending on the individual and their support network. Sometimes they actually decline in terms of their conduct, in terms of their behavior, and it makes their sentence even more unbearable, because now it's almost as though they've got nothing to live for, which again is a very sad thing to observe. Also, what's really sad to highlight is there are individuals, women who are almost, how can I say this respectfully? They repeat that cycle. So they almost, I've known of women, I've heard of women who have come in, and I've had up to 9 children. 9 children, and none of the children are with them anymore. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that is a rare case, but it happens on multiple occasions. To be honest.
That is really heartbreaking, as you've alluded to, because you recognize how important it is to have maternal and paternal strong parental units, whether it's the mother or the father, and that bond with the child, and to see the cycle, it seems to suggest that there's something very, very difficult about breaking out of the environments that some people have found themselves in. And so I wonder, from your experience, can you speak a little bit to the role of the environment that actually contributes perhaps to whether it's male or female entering into prison or finding themselves in trouble?
Right. Sure. So, I mean, what I'll do is, I'll kind of give a brief intro to how I sort of came to kind of join the service. I grew up in Stonebridge, which, for those who know Stonebridge, it's quite a volatile area. Historically known for violence, known for drugs, drug dealing, and so on. So I left school with no education, very little education. Was it a product of my environment? No, it was just me. I but my mother was adamant I wasn't going to become a product of my environment. So she was on my case. She was on my case to make sure that I done something purposeful with my life. So I joined the civil service initially in immigration, but I then quickly moved over into the prison service, where I spent again the vast majority of my working career. So, and to be honest, my mum used to tell me stories of young black men who really kind of had no purpose in life. So when I joined the service, it stood out to me that, do you know what? I grew up in a very similar environment to a lot of these guys. So for me, what can I do? What can I do to make a difference? What can I do to help these people where they are? And sometimes that helps and gives them some hope that although your environment can influence your future, there is an element of choice involved in that. So coming directly in response to your question, in terms of the barriers that kind of are in place, that kind of hinder or affect people and their sentences, so to speak. We have to understand that the prison environment is very volatile, and primarily the aim of prison is to keep people imprisoned, to keep them secured within the four. That primarily, let's not beat around the bush. It's purely that. It's to keep them locked up. Yes, I know there is a rehabilitation agenda, but and I'm going to speak on that in a short while. But the reality is, there isn't a great deal that is being done to actually achieve that rehabilitation. And I suppose, knowing that, we have to then kind of think outside the box, and not solely rely on the government then, to make these changes and to change these lives and to reform these characters. Because some individuals, there are individuals, by the way, come out very well. They use their time in prison, whilst in prison and whilst incarcerated, their lives around. There are cases, there are positive cases. Don't get me wrong, there are. I'm gonna be quite honest. It's not the majority. It's
wow.
Not the majority. Yeah.
Ambrose, you said a lot there, because the first point is I want to dig a little bit deeper into that. So, of course, you are right. There are two schools of thoughts generally when you're talking academically around the purpose of prison. One is to punish, the other is to rehabilitate. And there's been back and forth going through all of that. But in your 16 years over different governments, what you're suggesting is primarily, as opposed to all of these discussions and so forth, and the programs, because there are programs, mentorship and everything else. Primarily, the main focus you're saying is just to make sure that people are secure and serve their time.
Exactly. Primarily, and also, whilst that is the primary agenda, there are other factors that come into that. So what the prison service find themselves, unfortunately, doing is firefighting. And when I say firefighting, I mean just dealing with the issues that society has created, and that we experience in our communities within that confined space. So imagine the prison is a community within a community. Now, what we watch on TVs, in terms of a lot of what we watch on TVs is American based, and their prison system is very different to ours, by the way, if you didn't know that. Very, very different to ours. But here in the UK, you know, they are, you know, they've made improvements on dealing with insufficient staffing levels, which is a major factor. Staffing levels leads to longer times being locked within your cell, up to 23 hours a day. Also, they have to deal with the increasing levels of violence as well, which again, the community that they lock up transfers. The culture continues. It doesn't stop. It just continues and almost is magnified because they are concentrated within a confined space. They've also got issues of dealing with kind of prohibited activity, and also the kind of concerted indiscipline as well. Or if you package that all up, it's just the most volatile place that anyone could ever be in for their life.
Wow. So basically, they're understaffed, they're under-resourced, they don't have the funding that they need, and so basically, with all of those factors playing into the whole mix, should we say, the only thing they can do is really make sure that they're just secure. Yeah. Which means then that, and this comes to the other point that you're saying, that we can't rely on the government. We can't outsource our responsibilities to the prison system, to the government, to local authorities. We need to be more active. We need to talk about that message of personal responsibility, that you do have a choice. And actually take a hold of that. Now, I just wanted to speak on the idea of personal choice, because for me, I wouldn't say I had grown up in the roughest of neighborhoods, but I was very much aware of who the drug dealers were, who the gangs were in growing up in a council estate. Never got involved, but unconsciously, when I look back at that, it seemed that society had shaped a message unconsciously that told me this is the only way for you.
Sure.
And so if I wanted to make six-figure salaries and get the car, you know, the closest role model you would have is the drug dealers or anything like. So I'm guessing then there is a way that we need to be personally responsible to try and break those messages per se, and say there is a choice. That's not the only way, and do something a little bit different. What do you say to that? Would that be fair?
Yeah, no, absolutely spot on. We definitely need to change that narrative. You know, and don't get me wrong. I mean, I'm not saying this is a walk in the park. You know, because what you're doing is you have to be intentional about you know, addressing the needs within our communities. And if you're not going to take it seriously, then don't expect no results. You know, just like, you know, we know you know what the church represents. Those of us who are seasoned, we know what the church represents, but we need to understand that church is an extension of our homes. Do you know what I mean? So when you kind of translate that into, you know, the issue that we find, or we can evidently see in society, we know that the root cause of this issue is broken homes. It's broken homes, man. It's broken homes. But guess what? Although this is a fact or a factor, you know, I'm a product from a broken home. So there is choice. There is choice, but one has to develop a level of kind of like, you know, accountability for their own actions. You know what I mean, and stuff. And I think you know, it's always, we have unfortunately developed or allowed or fostered this idea that it's someone else's fault. No, what? It's not. And it kind of isn't. it's yours. Like you made this choice. Do you know what I mean? But at the same time, whilst you have made that choice, there is a way out. You might have fallen, but you don't have to stay down. And it's about getting up, and responding to that failure. I just don't think that is managed very well as a community.
Yeah. Wow. I think you're absolutely right. So then looking at everything that we've mentioned in terms of the environment, personal responsibilities and so forth, where can the local church sit in providing support, providing a space to be helpful, should we say?
Yeah, so interesting. I mean, I gave this some thought before now, and what somewhat came to me by the Holy Spirit is that we need to see people as individuals. If that makes sense.
Tell me more. Tell me more. Help me understand that.
So I'm gonna I'm a God-fearing man. Jesus' example was that he met people where they were. And we as followers of Christ are called to do exactly that. We need to meet people in their places of vulnerability, in their places. We need to meet them where they are, and not fear the environment that we are by default involved in. We are a part of this community. We are a part of society. Do you know what I mean? But often I see that there is a barrier between the church and and people in prison.
Do you have an example? What does that barrier look like?
So, all right. So, how do we touch or impact or help someone who is linked to a gang? Is the example. Now listen, we have members who are linked to our church who are serving time. For that same reason, they are part of or affiliated with a gang. And because of their activity and because of their choices, as a church, we find that very alien. It's just almost as though, well, they're not really, the fact that they've made those life choices, they're not like us. And when I use Jesus as an example, Jesus went to the lowest of the low. he wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty. Do you know what I mean? If that was necessary to touch that person's life and to turn them around. And I think sometimes we are afraid of what society portrays, what the media portrays of these individuals. And it boils down to the fact that they have made a wrong life choice. It boils down to that. You or I could end up in this situation. And that's my point. Do you know what I mean? It's not like we're not exempt. Like all it takes is one life experience, one life situation to kind of dictate how what happens to us from that point onwards. And I think we need to understand that there are choices that are made that unfortunately lead to one's life almost spiraling out of control, in essence.
Mercy. I think you're right. My bad choices are not better than a gang member's bad choices.
Exactly.
And I cannot expect to reach someone who may be affiliated with a gang by simply sitting in a building one Saturday a week. I need to really go be relational, need to be empathetic, realize it is a bad decision. And if they do not have someone there that they can feel supports them, they're just going to continue making more bad decisions. Go for it.
I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that, man. You literally, I can't help myself. I'm glad you said that. So this is what happens in most cases. When you are sentenced or you are then imprisoned, the decisions that you are then presented with, or the choices that you are then presented with, are simply fight or flight. What do I do in this situation? And their natural response is to do what is natural to them, which is what? I need to be amongst people who have my back, forgetting that this is what led them to the very same place in the first place. You know? and this is true, man. This is true. I'd never experienced this more than when I worked in Brixton, HMP Brixton. I saw individuals affiliated with Gang A, join a totally separate gang who they would have been rivals with on the outside. But they joined Gang B because they needed protection. So when you think of that spiral, it makes no sense to you and I, but to them it's logical, because in this volatile situation, who's going to have my back? and this is where the domino effect goes, and it spirals out of control, because you won't believe the things that happen as a result of these choices that they are sometimes kind of forced to make. Then, do you know what I mean? It's you know, sometimes you have to prove yourself. Sometimes you have to, you know, do things that you really are uncomfortable with and wouldn't normally do. But to get through that period, to get through that sentence, you need to make these choices, which for me is really sad.
So basically, what the church can do is go out of their way to make sure that they have their back, and they know that. That is fantastic. I love it. I think that's a rallying cry for me, because I think, of course, if we understand this is what we need to do, because we understand the process, we understand what will happen if they don't. And the next thing is just simply to put the steps in place to make sure that we can do so in a consistent manner where we build those relationships.
You go.
I know that we're coming very close to the end, but you've alluded to it a couple of times that there are a couple of people who have been able to make it out. You've also cited yourself, even in the circumstances and the environments that you were brought up in. You were able to make different choices. What is one of the most touching stories that you have witnessed throughout your experience in the prison service?
Wow. So touching. So in a female estate in HMP Holloway, prior to exposure, there was I mean, I can mention her name. She's in the public domain. I mean, her name was Gina Moffat. Gina Moffat was linked to one of the most notorious drug dealers. I mean, they were involved in millions of pounds worth of drugs. When she was arrested, she came in and You know, in the service, they do offer, there are opportunities, by the way. I mean, opportunities to study a degree, opportunities to really kind of, you know, develop and enhance yourself so that when you are released, you know, you stand a fighting chance. So she while she spent her sentence, she seized the opportunity. She, upon her release, I'm gonna cut this out. Upon her release, the last I heard, she successfully owns 2 or 3 businesses. You hearing me? She successfully owns 2 or 3 businesses. She had no education prior to coming into custody. She owns a florist and she owns a cafe. Opportunities are there. when I saw that, I mean, don't forget, I observed her, you know, literally remaining dedicated, attending, you know, classes and so on. And to hear that when she left, you know, she'd achieved so much, which again, Lifeline gave her an alternative option. And this is what it is. We need to find a way of providing practical support. That is the key. I can't go to anyone and expect them to change their lifestyle without offering some kind of practical help. You know, you and I both know, we can pray all day, but there has to be some practical intervention. So for me, that's one of the most amazing stories that I witnessed, I observed, and I know that you know if you are willing to accept the support and accept what is available, you can turn your life around. You can absolutely turn your life around.
Ambrose, that's amazing. It's a wonderful, wonderful story, and it just proves that it is possible. We just need to have the practical elements in there. I really appreciate you taking this time to sit down and talk. There are so many gems that you've shared. We could have gone on for another hour, but I really thank you for that. We will definitely need to pick this up again. Thank you again.
More than welcome. Thank you. Thanks again for the invitation.
Thank you for joining us for that interview. We know that this work is huge, and if you have an interest in working with people who are at risk of going into prison, who are in prison, or who have just come out of prison and need support, we want to hear from you. Please go to our website at whereisthechurch.co.uk, sign up, and we'll be in touch on how you can get involved. But until next time, take care.